In a city where skyscrapers touched the clouds and dreams seemed as vast as the horizon, there lived a young man named Ethan Carter. His life, however, was far from glamorous. Born into a family that struggled to make ends meet, Ethan grew up in a small, cramped apartment on the outskirts of town. The walls were thin, the furniture old, and the bills piled high. But despite these challenges, Ethan carried an unshakable spirit within him. He had big dreams, not for fame or fortune, but simply to provide his mother, who worked tirelessly as a seamstress, with a better life. Ethan's mother, Mrs. Carter, was a woman of quiet strength. Her hands moved swiftly over fabric day and night, stitching together garments for wealthy clients who barely acknowledged her existence. Yet she never complained. Instead, she encouraged Ethan to dream big. "Hard work always pays off," she would say, her voice soft but firm. Those words became Ethan's guiding light even when times were tough. From a young age, Ethan showed promise in school. He excelled in math and science, often staying late after class to ask questions or help classmates who needed extra support. Teachers noticed his potential and urged him to aim for college, but fate had other plans. When Ethan graduated high school, his family faced mounting financial difficulties. College tuition felt like an impossible mountain to climb. Reluctantly, Ethan put his academic aspirations aside and took on whatever jobs he could find, delivering packages, washing dishes at local restaurants, and tutoring younger kids in exchange for modest pay. Despite the long hours and meager wages, Ethan refused to let go of his ambition. Late at night, after finishing his shifts, he taught himself coding through free online courses. Sitting at a rickety desk under the dim glow of a flickering lamp, Ethan pored over tutorials and practice exercises. Programming fascinated him. It was like solving puzzles, each line of code bringing him closer to creating something meaningful. Though it wasn't easy, especially when exhaustion weighed heavily on his shoulders, Ethan persisted because he believed in the power of learning. One evening, while scrolling through job listings on his battered laptop, Ethan stumbled upon an opportunity that made his heart race. Lumina Tech, one of the most prestigious tech companies in the city, was hiring entry-level developers. The position required skills he didn't fully possess yet, but Ethan saw this as his chance to break free from the cycle of dead-end jobs. Determined to seize the moment, he spent weeks perfecting his resume. With no formal degree to boast about, he focused on highlighting his problem-solving abilities, self-taught programming knowledge, and unwavering determination. Finally, the day arrived when Ethan received an email confirming his interview at Lumina Tech. His hands trembled as he read the message. This was it, the opportunity he'd been waiting for. Overwhelmed with excitement and nerves, Ethan prepared meticulously. He borrowed a suit from Mr. Thompson, an elderly neighbor who rarely wore his own anymore. The suit was slightly too large, but Ethan adjusted it as best he could. On the morning of the interview, he woke before sunrise, rehearsing answers to possible questions aloud as he walked to the bus stop. When Ethan arrived at Lumina Tech's headquarters, his breath caught in his throat. The building was breathtaking. Sleek tower of glass and steel that reflected the morning sunlight. People dressed in sharp suits bustled in and out, their confident strides making Ethan feel out of place. As he entered the lobby, he couldn't help but notice how polished everything looked, from the marble floors to the reception desk. For a moment, doubt crept into his mind. What if they realized he didn't belong here? What if they laughed at his makeshift suit and lack of experience? But then Ethan remembered his mother's words. Hard work always pays off. Taking a deep breath, he reminded himself why he was there. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for his family, for a future where they wouldn't have to worry about unpaid bills or broken appliances. That thought gave him courage. While waiting nervously in the lobby, Ethan observed those around him. Most people were engrossed in their phones or quietly reviewing notes, but one person stood out. A woman seated a few chairs away. She appeared frazzled, juggling papers and sipping coffee while glancing repeatedly at her watch. There was something relatable about her demeanor, as though she too carried the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Little did Ethan know, this seemingly ordinary encounter would soon change the course of his life forever. As he sat there, trying to calm his racing thoughts, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that today was different. Perhaps it was the grandeur of the building, the anticipation of the interview, or the presence of the mysterious woman nearby. Whatever it was, he knew one thing for certain. He was ready to give this opportunity everything he had. After all, sometimes life surprises us in ways we least expect, and Ethan was about to discover just how true that could be. The lobby of Lumina Tech buzzed with activity, a stark contrast to the nervous silence Ethan felt inside. He sat stiffly on the edge of his chair, clutching his resume tightly in one hand, while the other fidgeted with the slightly too long sleeve of his borrowed suit. Around him, people moved with purpose, employees chatting animatedly, visitors signing in at the reception desk, and security guards patrolling the area. The polished marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers, making Ethan feel even more out of place. His shoes, scuffed from years of wear, seemed to whisper reminders of how different his world was from this one. As he tried to focus on rehearsing potential interview questions in his head, his attention kept drifting back to the woman seated a few chairs away. She looked frazzled, her dark hair slightly mussed as if she'd been rushing through the morning. Her blouse was neatly pressed, but there was an air of disarray about her. Papers stacked precariously on her lap, a half-empty coffee cup balanced precariously on the armrest of her chair, and a faint crease between her eyebrows that suggested she was deep in thought. Every now and then, she glanced at her watch, her lips pressing into a thin line. Ethan couldn't help but wonder who she was. Was she another candidate? A visitor meeting someone important? Or maybe an employee running late for a crucial presentation? Whatever the case, she radiated a quiet authority that made her stand out among the crowd. Yet, despite her composed exterior, there was something vulnerable about her demeanor, something almost human amidst the sea of polished professionalism surrounding them. Just as Ethan began to shift his focus back to his own predicament, chaos erupted. A janitor pushing a cart laden with cleaning supplies accidentally tripped over a loose tile near the entrance. The cart tipped over with a deafening crash, sending buckets of water, mops, and sponges tumbling across the floor. The sound echoed through the cavernous space, drawing gasps from those nearby. Within seconds, the pristine lobby transformed into a chaotic scene. Water spread rapidly, creating slippery patches that sent people stumbling backward in alarm. Panic rippled through the room. Some individuals jumped up from their seats, frantically trying to avoid the spreading puddle. Others shouted warnings to those farther away, pointing toward the growing mess. The janitor scrambled to pick up the scattered items, apologizing profusely as he worked. But the situation only worsened as more people moved around, adding to the confusion. Ethan's instincts kicked in immediately. Without thinking twice, he sprang to his feet and rushed toward the commotion. Grabbing a mop and several towels from the overturned cart, he began working alongside the janitor to contain the spill. His movements were quick yet deliberate, clearing paths for others and preventing further accidents. Though his suit jacket flapped awkwardly as he worked, Ethan didn't care. This wasn't about appearances. It was about doing what needed to be done. Amidst the chaos, Ethan noticed the frazzled woman he'd been observing earlier. She had risen from her seat, attempting to step carefully around the wet floor. But, before she could react, her foot slipped, sending her stumbling forward. Papers flew from her hands, scattering across the lobby floor. Several sheets landed dangerously close to the spreading water, threatening to soak and ruin them. Without hesitation, Ethan abandoned the mop and lunged toward her, catching her elbow, just in time to steady her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm despite the pandemonium around them. The woman blinked, clearly startled, then nodded. "Yes, thank you," she said, her tone tinged with relief. "I wasn't paying attention." "No problem," Ethan replied with a reassuring smile. Then glancing down at the scattered papers, he added, "Let me help you with these." For the next few moments, Ethan crouched beside her, gathering the documents and ensuring none were damaged. As they worked together, he couldn't help but Notice how organized the papers were. Charts, graphs, and printed emails marked with notes in neat handwriting. Whoever this woman was, she clearly took her work seriously. When all the documents were safely collected, Ethan handed them back to her, careful not to smudge any of the ink. "Thank you so much," the woman said sincerely, tucking the papers securely under her arm. "You didn't have to do that." "It's no trouble at all," Ethan replied, brushing a bead of sweat from his forehead. "I'm just glad you're okay." The woman smiled, a genuine, grateful expression that softened the tension in her features. Extending her hand, she introduced herself. "I'm Clara, by the way." "Ethan," he responded, shaking her hand firmly. Their brief interaction felt oddly meaningful, though neither of them could explain why. With the immediate crisis resolved, Clara gathered her belongings and stood up. "Well, I should probably get going," she said, glancing once more at her watch. "Thanks again for your help, Ethan. You really saved me back there." "You're welcome," Ethan said, offering another warm smile. "Good luck with whatever you're heading to." Clara nodded, her expression thoughtful, and turned to leave. As she walked away, Ethan watched her disappear into the throng of people, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and satisfaction. He didn't know who she was or why she seemed so preoccupied, but he hoped she made it wherever she was going without further mishaps. Returning to his seat, Ethan realized his hands were still trembling, not from nerves this time, but from adrenaline. Helping Clara had momentarily distracted him from the looming interview, but now reality came crashing back. He adjusted his tie, straightened his posture, and reminded himself why he was here. Today was about proving himself, about showing Luminatech that he belonged in their world, even if he didn't look the part. As he waited for his name to be called, Ethan replayed the events of the past few minutes in his mind. He hadn't thought twice about jumping in to help. It was simply what anyone would have done, right? But as he glanced around the lobby, he noticed something telling. Most people had chosen to stay out of the way, watching the chaos unfold from a safe distance. Only a handful, including himself, had stepped forward to assist. That realization lingered in Ethan's thoughts as he prepared for his interview. Maybe kindness wasn't as common as he'd assumed. Maybe taking action, even in small ways, mattered more than he realized. Little did he know, his decision to help Clara would soon prove to be far more significant than he could ever imagine. For now, though, Ethan pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the task ahead. He smoothed his resume one last time, practiced his opening lines silently, and reminded himself of the values that had brought him this far. Hard work, integrity, and a willingness to lend a hand when it mattered most. If nothing else, he knew he could walk out of that building with his head held high, knowing he'd done the right thing, even if the outcome wasn't what he hoped for. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. And unbeknownst to Ethan, Clara, the stranger he'd helped mere minutes ago, was already forming an impression of him that would change everything. Ethan's name was finally called, and his heart skipped a beat. A receptionist with a clipboard gestured for him to follow her down a long, brightly lit hallway, lined with framed awards and company milestones. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if his legs were carrying not just his body, but also the weight of every sacrifice he'd made to get here. The polished floor reflected his scuffed shoes, a quiet reminder of how far he still had to go. The receptionist led him into a conference room where 3 panelists sat behind a sleek glass table. Their expressions were unreadable, professional masks that gave nothing away. Ethan swallowed hard and forced a polite smile as he shook hands with each of them. One man stood out immediately, tall, stern-looking, with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce right through Ethan. His suit was impeccable, his posture rigid, and his demeanor exuded authority. Ethan guessed this must be someone high up in the company hierarchy, perhaps even part of the executive team. Beside him sat a younger woman whose face softened slightly when she greeted Ethan, offering a brief nod of encouragement. And then, there was Clara, or rather, the woman who looked exactly like Clara. At first glance, Ethan didn't connect the dots. She wore a different blouse now, her hair neatly combed back, and she carried herself with an air of confidence that hadn't been as apparent in the lobby. But as their eyes met, recognition dawned on both of them. Clara's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile before returning to a neutral expression. Ethan blinked, unsure whether to acknowledge their earlier encounter or pretend it hadn't happened. In the end, he decided to play it safe, taking his seat without comment. The interview began with standard questions about his background and experience. Ethan answered honestly, explaining his lack of formal education and describing the odd jobs he'd held over the years. He talked about tutoring children after school, delivering packages during sweltering summer days, and washing dishes late into the night. Though these roles weren't glamorous, they had taught him valuable lessons about responsibility, adaptability, and perseverance. He spoke passionately about his self-taught coding skills, sharing anecdotes about projects he'd worked on in his free time. One story involved creating a simple app to help his mother track orders for her sewing business, a project born out of necessity, but fueled by love. As Ethan spoke, he noticed subtle differences in the panelists' reactions. The stern man scribbled notes furiously, his brow furrowed as though dissecting every word. The younger woman nodded along occasionally, clearly engaged but reserved in her responses. Clara, however, leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady and thoughtful. There was something almost curious about the way she studied him, not judgmental but analytical, as if trying to piece together a puzzle. When it was the stern man's turn to ask questions, the atmosphere shifted. His tone was direct, almost confrontational, as he grilled Ethan about his qualifications or lack thereof. "Why should we hire you?" he asked pointedly, "when we have candidates with degrees from top universities and years of relevant experience?" Ethan froze for a moment, the weight of the question pressing down on him. This was the moment he'd feared most, the one where his shortcomings would be laid bare for everyone to see. But instead of shrinking under the pressure, Ethan took a deep breath and chose his words carefully. "I may not have the same credentials as other candidates," he admitted, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "But I believe what sets me apart is my determination to learn and grow. Hard work has gotten me this far, and I'm willing to put in whatever effort it takes to succeed here. I don't just want to do a job, I want to make a difference." His response hung in the air, met with silence from the panelists. For a fleeting second, Ethan wondered if he'd said the wrong thing. Had he sounded too defensive? Too desperate? Then, unexpectedly, Clara broke the silence. "That's an admirable mindset," she said, her voice calm but firm. Turning to the stern man, she added, "Sometimes raw talent and passion can outweigh formal qualifications. We've seen it happen before." The stern man raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Instead, he moved on to technical questions, testing Ethan's knowledge of programming languages and problem-solving strategies. While Ethan wasn't able to answer every question perfectly, he demonstrated a solid understanding of the basics and showcased his ability to think critically under pressure. When the panelists presented him with a hypothetical scenario involving a malfunctioning software system, Ethan surprised himself by proposing a creative solution that earned nods of approval, even from the stern man. Throughout the interview, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Clara was watching him closely. Her questions were probing yet fair, designed to challenge him without being overly intimidating. At one point, she asked, "Tell us about a time when you faced a major obstacle and how you overcame it." Ethan hesitated, then recounted the story of his family's financial struggles and how he'd juggled multiple jobs while teaching himself to code. He described the late nights spent hunched over his laptop, the frustration of encountering bugs he couldn't fix, and the joy of finally completing a project that worked flawlessly. As he spoke, he noticed Clara's expression soften ever so slightly, as though she saw something in him that resonated deeply with her own experiences. By the time the interview concluded, Ethan felt drained, but hopeful. The panelists thanked him for his time and assured him they would be in touch soon. As he gathered his things and prepared to leave, Clara excused herself briefly, saying she needed to retrieve something from her office. Ethan watched her go, wondering if their earlier interaction in the lobby had influenced her opinion of him, or if it was all just coincidence. As he stepped back into the lobby, Ethan replayed the interview in his mind, analyzing every question, every answer, every facial expression. He knew he hadn't been the most qualified candidate in the room, but he hoped his authenticity and determination had left a lasting impression. What he didn't realize was that Clara had already decided to take matters into her own hands. Moments later, Ethan was summoned back, not to the conference room but to Clara's private office. Confusion washed over him as he followed the receptionist once again, this time to a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Clara greeted him warmly, gesturing for him to sit across from her, at a minimalist desk adorned with only a laptop and a single framed photograph. "Ethan," she began, her tone gentle but commanding, "I wanted to speak with you privately because I believe your potential extends beyond what today's interview revealed." Ethan blinked, unsure how to respond. Before he could stammer out a reply, Clara continued, "You might not know this, but I observed your actions in the lobby earlier. The way you handled the situation with such composure and kindness, it spoke volumes about your character. Not many people would have stepped forward to help like you did." Her words caught Ethan off guard. He had assumed no one paid attention to such small acts of kindness, especially in a place as fast-paced and competitive as Luminatech. Yet here was Clara, acknowledging something he hadn't thought twice about. Clara leaned back in her chair, studying him intently. "At Luminatech, we value more than just technical skills. We look for individuals who embody integrity, empathy, and resilience. Today you demonstrated all three qualities, not just in the lobby but throughout our conversation as well." Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to thank her, to express how much her words meant to him, but the lump in his throat made it difficult to speak. Instead, he simply nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Clara smiled softly, then dropped the bombshell. "I'd like to offer you a position as a junior developer in our innovation department. It won't be easy, you'll face challenges and steep learning curves, but I believe you have what it takes to succeed here." For a moment, Ethan thought he'd misheard her. His mind raced, struggling to process the enormity of what she was saying. When reality finally sank in, he felt a surge of emotion. Gratitude, disbelief, and overwhelming relief all rolled into one. "Thank you," he managed to choke out, his voice trembling. "I promise I won't let you down." Clara extended her hand, sealing the deal with a firm handshake. "Welcome to Luminatech, Ethan. I look forward to seeing what you accomplish here." As Ethan left the office, his head spinning with possibilities, he realized this was more than just a job offer. It was validation for his hard work, his sacrifices, and his unwavering belief that doing the right thing mattered. And though he didn't fully understand it yet, his decision to help a stranger in the lobby had set off a chain reaction that would change his life forever. Ethan stepped out of Clara's office, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. The weight of what had just happened was still sinking in, and he found himself replaying the conversation over and over again. He had walked into Luminatech that morning, as an underqualified candidate with little hope of standing out among the sea of applicants. Now he was leaving as someone who had been personally offered a position by none other than Clara Bennett, the CEO herself. It was surreal, almost too good to be true. As he made his way through the gleaming halls of the company, Ethan couldn't help but notice how different everything felt now. The polished floors, the towering glass walls, and even the hum of activity seemed less intimidating and more welcoming. For the first time since entering the building, he didn't feel like an outsider looking in. Instead, he felt a spark of belonging, a sense that he might actually have a place here despite all the odds stacked against him. But there was one thing Ethan still didn't fully grasp: why Clara had chosen him. Sure, he had demonstrated determination during the interview, and yes, he'd helped her earlier in the lobby, but wasn't that just basic human decency? Surely there were dozens, if not hundreds, of other candidates who were equally qualified, if not more so. What made him special enough to catch the attention of someone as accomplished and influential as Clara? Clara must have sensed his lingering doubts because she invited him back to her office for a brief chat before he left for the day. "You look like you have questions," she said with a knowing smile as Ethan hesitated at the doorway. "I do," Ethan admitted, stepping inside. "I mean, I'm grateful beyond words for this opportunity, but I can't help wondering why you picked me. I know I don't have the same experience or education as most of the other candidates." Clara gestured for him to sit down, then leaned forward slightly, her expression thoughtful. "Let me tell you something, Ethan. When I started Luminatech years ago, I didn't come from privilege or connections. I came from hard work and grit. I learned early on that success isn't always about having the perfect resume. It's about character. It's about how you treat others, how you handle challenges, and whether you're willing to go above and beyond when it matters." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "Today, I saw glimpses of those qualities. In you, you didn't hesitate to step in and help when chaos broke out in the lobby. You didn't think twice about assisting me, even though we were complete strangers. And during the interview, you spoke honestly about your journey, not just your strengths, but also your struggles. That kind of authenticity is rare, especially in environments like this." Ethan listened intently, absorbing every word. He had never thought of himself as particularly remarkable. He simply did what he believed was right. Hearing Clara validate those actions and frame them as strengths was both humbling and empowering. "And let's not forget," Clara added with a playful glint in her eye, "you impressed us with your technical skills too. Your solution to the hypothetical problem we presented, that was clever. Not everyone thinks outside the box like that." For the first time that day, Ethan allowed himself to feel proud, not just of landing the job, but of everything that had led him here. Every late-night coding session, every exhausting shift at menial jobs, every sacrifice he'd made along the way had brought him to this moment. And while he knew there would be challenges ahead, he also felt ready to face them head-on. Before Ethan left, Clara gave him some final advice. "Starting tomorrow, you'll officially join our innovation team. It's a fast-paced environment, and you'll be working alongside some of the brightest minds in tech. Don't be afraid to ask questions, make mistakes, or speak up when you have ideas. Growth doesn't happen without discomfort." Ethan nodded, committing her words to memory. As he shook her hand once more, he noticed the framed photograph on her desk, a picture of a young girl smiling brightly, surrounded by books and science kits. "Is that your daughter?" he asked curiously. Clara's eyes softened as she glanced at the photo. "Yes. She's the reason I built this company, to create opportunities for people like her and like you, people who deserve a chance to shine, no matter where they come from." The sincerity in her voice struck a chord deep within Ethan. He realized that Clara wasn't just a businesswoman focused on profits and productivity. She was someone who genuinely cared about making a difference, both in the lives of her employees and in the world at large. That revelation filled him with a renewed sense of purpose. If Clara believed in him, then maybe he could believe in himself too. When Ethan finally stepped outside the building, the city buzzed around him as usual, but his perspective had shifted entirely. The towering skyscrapers no longer seemed daunting. They represented possibility. The bustling streets weren't overwhelming anymore. They were alive with energy and potential. Even the scuffed shoes he wore felt like badges of honor, reminders of the road he'd traveled to get here. That evening, Ethan returned home to share the news with his mother. Mrs. Carter was sitting at the kitchen table, mending a torn dress, under the dim light of an old lamp. Her hands moved steadily, but her shoulders sagged with exhaustion. When Ethan walked in, she looked up, expecting another ordinary night. But the look on his face told her something extraordinary had happened. "Mom," Ethan began, his voice trembling with excitement, "I got the job." At first, Mrs. Carter stared at him, unsure if she'd heard correctly. Then slowly, realization dawned and tears welled up in her eyes. She stood up, dropping the needle and thread onto the table, and pulled her son into a tight embrace. "Oh, Ethan," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I'm so proud of you." They stayed like that for several minutes, holding each other as years of struggle and sacrifice melted away in the warmth of shared joy. Finally, Mrs. Carter pulled back, wiping her tears with the edge of her apron. "Tell me everything," she urged, pulling out a chair for him at the table. Ethan recounted the entire day, from the chaotic scene in the lobby to the grueling interview and finally Clara's unexpected offer. His mother listened intently, gasping in awe at certain parts and laughing softly at others. By the time he finished, she was beaming with pride. "You've worked so hard for this," she said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "This is just the beginning, Ethan. You'll see. You're going to do amazing things." Her faith in him only strengthened his resolve. Over dinner, a simple meal of rice and stew, they talked about the future. Ethan described the projects he hoped to work on at Lumina Tech and the skills he planned to develop. Mrs. Carter shared stories of her own dreams when she was younger, dreams she'd put aside to care for her family. Listening to her, Ethan felt a renewed determination to succeed, not just for himself but for her too. The next morning, Ethan woke up early, unable to sleep any longer. Today was his first official day at Lumina Tech, and he wanted to make sure everything went perfectly. After ironing his suit jacket, which still fit awkwardly but looked presentable, he packed his bag with notebooks, pens, and a copy of the welcome packet Clara had given him. Before heading out, he stopped in front of the cracked mirror in their tiny bathroom and practiced his introduction one last time. "I'm Ethan Carter," he said aloud, his reflection staring back at him. "And I belong here." When he arrived at the office, Clara greeted him warmly and introduced him to the rest of the innovation team. They were a diverse group of individuals, each bringing unique perspectives and talents to the table. Some were seasoned professionals with years of experience, while others were fresh faces eager to prove themselves. Despite their differences, they all shared a common drive: to innovate, to solve problems, and to push boundaries. Over the next few weeks, Ethan threw himself into his new role with unwavering dedication. He soaked up knowledge like a sponge, asking endless questions and seeking feedback whenever possible. His colleagues quickly warmed to him, impressed by his eagerness to learn and his willingness to contribute. Even the stern executive from the interview panel, who turned out to be the head of the department, began to soften toward Ethan, acknowledging his progress and potential. Through it all, Clara remained a guiding presence. She checked in regularly, offering advice and encouragement while challenging Ethan to stretch beyond his comfort zone. Under her mentorship, he grew not only as a developer but also as a person. He learned the importance of collaboration, creativity, and resilience, all qualities that would serve him well in the years to come. Looking back on that fateful day in the lobby, Ethan realized how much had changed, not just in his circumstances, but in his outlook on life. Helping Clara hadn't been a calculated move or a stroke of luck. It had been an act of kindness born out of instinct. And yet, it had opened doors he never imagined possible. Sometimes doing the right thing leads to opportunities you couldn't predict, and for Ethan, that lesson would stay with him forever. Months turned into years, and Ethan's journey at Lumina Tech unfolded in ways he could never have anticipated. From the moment he stepped into the innovation department as a junior developer, his life transformed not just professionally but personally. Each day brought new challenges, opportunities to grow, and moments that tested his resilience. Yet with every hurdle, Ethan emerged stronger, more confident, and increasingly determined to make the most of the chance Clara had given him. At first, adapting to the fast-paced environment was no easy feat. The innovation team worked on cutting-edge projects, developing software solutions, designing user-friendly apps, and brainstorming ideas that could revolutionize industries. Ethan often found himself overwhelmed by the complexity of the tasks and the high expectations placed on him. There were days when he doubted whether he truly belonged in such an elite group, but instead of letting fear paralyze him, he channeled it into motivation. He spent late nights poring over technical manuals, attending workshops, and seeking guidance from his colleagues. Slowly but surely, he began to catch up and then surpass the skills of many around him. One of Ethan's earliest breakthroughs came during a project aimed at creating a mobile app for small business owners. The goal was to simplify inventory management, allowing users to track orders, sales, and expenses seamlessly. While the senior developers focused on the back-end architecture, Ethan volunteered to design the user interface, a task typically reserved for experienced designers. Drawing inspiration from his mother's struggles as a seamstress, he envisioned a clean, intuitive layout that even someone unfamiliar with technology could navigate effortlessly. When Ethan presented his prototype to the team, skepticism lingered in the air. Some questioned whether a newcomer like him could deliver results comparable to seasoned professionals. But Clara, who had quietly observed the presentation, nodded approvingly. "Let's test it," she said simply, silencing the doubters. The feedback from beta testers exceeded everyone's expectations. Small business owners praised the app's simplicity and functionality, calling it a game changer for their operations. When the final version launched, it quickly gained traction, earning positive reviews and boosting Luminatech's reputation as a leader in innovative tech solutions. For Ethan, this success wasn't just a career milestone, it was validation that his hard work and creativity mattered. As Ethan continued to excel, Clara took a special interest in mentoring him. She recognized not only his technical prowess but also his ability to connect with people. Unlike some of his peers who prioritized efficiency over empathy, Ethan always considered how his work impacted others. Whether it was collaborating with teammates or gathering insights from potential users, he approached every interaction with genuine care and respect. This quality resonated deeply with Clara, reminding her of her own values as a leader. Under Clara's guidance, Ethan gradually assumed greater responsibilities within the company. He led smaller teams, mentored interns, and contributed to strategic decision-making processes. His rise through the ranks wasn't meteoric, it was steady, earned through consistent effort and unwavering dedication. Along the way, he faced setbacks too. Failed experiments, rejected proposals, and moments of self-doubt. But each time, Clara encouraged him to view failures as stepping stones rather than roadblocks. "You'll never stop learning, Ethan," she told him once after a particularly challenging meeting. "Success isn't about avoiding mistakes, it's about growing from them. Keep pushing forward." Her words became a mantra for Ethan, guiding him through both triumphs and trials. Over time, he developed not just technical expertise but also leadership qualities that earned him the trust and admiration of his colleagues. By the 5th year at Luminatech, Ethan had risen to head the innovation department, a role previously held by none other than Clara herself. Taking on this position was both exhilarating and daunting. As head of the department, Ethan was responsible for overseeing all ongoing projects, managing budgets, and ensuring the team met its goals. The pressure was immense, but he tackled it with the same determination that had brought him this far. One of his first initiatives was to implement programs designed to support employees from underrepresented backgrounds. Inspired by his own struggles, Ethan understood the importance of creating pathways for individuals who might otherwise be overlooked. He introduced mentorship programs pairing junior staff with senior leaders, diversity training sessions to foster inclusivity, and flexible work arrangements to accommodate personal needs. These efforts weren't without resistance. Some executives questioned the necessity of such initiatives, arguing they detracted from productivity. But Clara stood firmly behind Ethan, reminding skeptics that investing in people ultimately benefited the entire organization. Beyond his professional achievements, Ethan's relationship with Clara evolved into something akin to family. Though their roles differed greatly, they shared a bond rooted in mutual respect and shared values. Clara often invited Ethan to informal dinners at her home, where they discussed everything from industry trends to personal aspirations. During one such evening, Clara revealed a secret she'd kept hidden for years. Her humble beginnings mirrored Ethan's in many ways. "I grew up in a household much like yours," she confessed, stirring her tea thoughtfully. "My parents worked tirelessly to provide for us, sacrificing so much just to keep food on the table. I know what it's like to feel invisible, to think your dreams are too big for the world you inhabit. But I also learned that resilience and kindness can open doors you never knew existed. Hearing Clara's story deepened Ethan's admiration for her. It explained why she had taken such a keen interest in him from the very beginning, not because she saw potential in his skills alone, but because she recognized a kindred spirit. Their connection transcended titles and positions. It was built on understanding, empathy, and a shared commitment to uplifting others. Ethan's success didn't go unnoticed outside Lumina Tech either. Local newspapers featured articles about his rise from poverty to prominence, highlighting his contributions to the tech industry and his advocacy for underprivileged communities. Friends and acquaintances reached out, congratulating him on his achievements. Even Mr. Thompson, the elderly neighbor who had lent him the suit for his interview, proudly claimed credit for Ethan's polished appearance that fateful day. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from his mother. Mrs. Carter, now retired from sewing, spent her days volunteering at community centers and spending time with Ethan whenever possible. Seeing her son thrive filled her with immeasurable joy. On one occasion, she accompanied Ethan to Lumina Tech's annual gala, an event celebrating the company's milestones and honoring outstanding employees. Dressed in a gown tailored specifically for the occasion, Mrs. Carter mingled with executives and guests, her pride evident in every smile and handshake. During the ceremony, Clara presented Ethan with an award for excellence in innovation. As she handed him the trophy, she addressed the audience, sharing snippets of Ethan's journey. "This young man embodies everything we stand for at Lumina Tech," she said, her voice ringing clear across the ballroom. "Talent, yes, but more importantly, heart. He reminds us that success is not defined by where you start, but by how far you're willing to go to create a better future, for yourself and for others." The room erupted in applause, and Ethan felt tears welling up in his eyes. Accepting the award, he thanked Clara, his team, and most importantly, his mother. "None of this would have been possible without her sacrifices," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "She taught me that hard work pays off, and she believed in me even when I struggled to believe in myself." That night marked a big turning point for Ethan, not because of the accolades or applause, but because it solidified his purpose. He realized that his journey wasn't just about personal success, it was about using his position to uplift those around him. Inspired by Clara's example, he vowed to continue paying it forward, ensuring that others facing similar challenges would find hope and opportunity. In the months that followed, Ethan launched a scholarship fund aimed at supporting students from low-income families pursuing careers in technology. He partnered with local schools to provide coding workshops, internships, and resources to aspiring developers. The program quickly gained traction, attracting donations from Lumina Tech employees and external sponsors alike. Watching young minds light up with excitement as they discovered the possibilities of programming reminded Ethan of his own early days, hunched over a laptop, teaching himself to code in the quiet hours of the night. Through it all, Ethan remained grounded. Despite his accomplishments, he never forgot where he came from or the lessons he'd learned along the way. Every challenge he faced, every act of kindness he extended, and every opportunity he seized reinforced his belief in the power of perseverance and compassion. And though he knew there would always be obstacles ahead, he faced them with the same courage and optimism that had carried him thus far. Looking back on his journey, from the chaotic lobby encounter to leading an entire department, Ethan marveled at how life had unfolded. What began as a simple act of helping a stranger had blossomed into a legacy of impact and inspiration. He owed much of his success to Clara, who, years passed and Ethan Carter became a name synonymous with innovation, resilience, and compassion, not just within Lumina Tech, but across the tech industry as a whole. His story had evolved from that of a struggling young man trying to make ends meet into a beacon of hope for countless individuals who dared to dream despite their circumstances. Yet, even as his career soared to heights he once thought unimaginable, Ethan never lost sight of the values that had guided him: hard work, kindness, and an unwavering belief in the potential of others. By the time Ethan reached his 10th year at Lumina Tech, the company had grown exponentially under Clara's visionary leadership, and Ethan's innovative contributions. Together, they transformed Luminatech into more than just a successful business. It became a force for good, championing initiatives that addressed societal challenges through technology. From creating affordable educational tools for underserved communities to developing sustainable energy solutions, Luminatech's projects touched lives around the world, and at the heart of these efforts was Ethan, whose determination to uplift others remained as strong as ever. One of Ethan's proudest achievements during this period was the expansion of his scholarship fund. What began as a modest program aimed at supporting local students quickly blossomed into a nationwide initiative. Partnering with schools, universities, and nonprofit organizations, Ethan established coding boot camps, mentorship networks, and financial aid programs for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. The fund not only provided resources but also fostered a sense of belonging among participants, showing them that they too could thrive in fields traditionally dominated by privilege. Ethan often visited beneficiaries of the scholarship fund, sharing his own journey and encouraging them to persevere no matter how daunting the obstacles might seem. During one such visit, he met a high school senior named Mia, whose story mirrored his own in many ways. Like Ethan, Mia lived in a small apartment with her single mother, juggling part-time jobs while excelling academically. When she approached him after his presentation, her eyes brimming with gratitude and determination, Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. "You remind me so much of myself," he told her warmly. "Don't let anyone tell you that your dreams are too big. If I can do it, so can you." Mia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. You've given me hope when I didn't think there was any." Moments like these reminded Ethan why he did what he did. Success wasn't measured by accolades or promotions. It was about making a difference in the lives of others. Every student he inspired, every family he helped, and every community he impacted reinforced his belief that true fulfillment came from giving back. As Ethan's influence grew, so did his responsibilities. He began speaking at conferences, workshops, and panel discussions, sharing insights on leadership, innovation, and social responsibility. His speeches were always grounded in authenticity, drawing from his personal experiences to connect with audiences on a deeper level. One of his most memorable talks took place at a global tech summit, where he recounted his journey. From the chaotic lobby encounter to leading Luminatech's innovation department. "Life has a funny way of surprising us," Ethan said, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "Sometimes doing the right thing, whether it's helping a stranger or pursuing your passion against all odds, leads to opportunities you never imagined. But here's the secret. Those opportunities aren't just meant for you. They're meant to be shared, to create ripples of change that touch lives far beyond your own." The audience erupted in applause, moved by his words. Afterward, dozens of attendees lined up to speak with him, eager to learn from his example. Among them was a young entrepreneur named Daniel, who had traveled from another country to attend the summit. Daniel's startup focused on using AI to improve healthcare access in rural areas, but he faced significant challenges securing funding and support. Inspired by Ethan's story, Daniel approached him with a mixture of admiration and desperation. "I don't know if I'll ever get my project off the ground," Daniel admitted. "It feels like everyone doubts me." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Doubt is part of the process. Trust me, I've been there. But remember this. Every great idea starts with someone willing to believe in it. Keep going, keep refining, and surround yourself with people who see your vision. That's how change happens." Daniel left the conversation feeling reinvigorated, armed with practical advice and renewed confidence. Months later, he sent Ethan an email updating him on his progress. With perseverance and guidance from mentors Ethan had connected him with, Daniel secured the funding needed to launch his startup. It was moments like these that reminded Ethan of the ripple effect of kindness and mentorship, the idea that one act of encouragement could spark a chain reaction of positive outcomes. Despite his growing fame, Ethan remained humble and approachable. Colleagues admired his ability to lead without arrogance, always prioritizing collaboration over competition. Under his guidance, the innovation team achieved groundbreaking milestones, earning recognition from industry leaders worldwide. Yet, Ethan never took full credit for these successes. Instead, he celebrated the collective effort of his team, acknowledging each member's unique contributions. Clara, now semi-retired, watched Ethan's evolution with immense pride. She often joked that hiring him had been the best decision she'd ever made, not just for Lumivatech but for herself personally. Their bond had deepened over the years, transcending professional boundaries to become a genuine friendship. On Ethan's 10th anniversary at the company, Clara surprised him with a heartfelt speech during a celebratory dinner. "When I first met Ethan in that chaotic lobby, I saw something special in him," Clara said, raising her glass. "But I had no idea just how extraordinary he would turn out to be. He's not just a leader, he's a changemaker. He reminds us all that success isn't about titles or wealth. It's about leaving the world better than we found it." The room erupted in cheers, and Ethan stood up to embrace Clara, overwhelmed by emotion. As he looked around at the faces of colleagues, friends, and mentees gathered to celebrate his journey, he realized how interconnected life truly was. Every choice, every act of kindness, every moment of courage shaped not only our own paths, but also the paths of those around us. In the years that followed, Ethan continued to push boundaries, both professionally and personally. He expanded Luminatech's outreach programs, partnered with global organizations to tackle pressing issues like climate change and digital literacy, and advocated for policies promoting diversity and inclusion in the tech industry. His legacy extended far beyond the confines of a single company. It was woven into the fabric of communities transformed by his vision and actions. Yet perhaps the most profound impact Ethan had was on the next generation. Young innovators inspired by his story carried forward his mission, creating solutions to problems they once thought insurmountable. Whether it was a teenager developing an app to combat food waste or a college student designing affordable prosthetics, using 3D printing, Ethan's influence rippled outward, touching lives in ways he might never fully comprehend. On quiet evenings, Ethan often returned to the rooftop terrace where he'd reflected on his journey years earlier. Standing there, gazing at the city lights stretching endlessly before him, he marveled at how far he'd come. From a struggling boy in a cramped apartment to a leader shaping the future of technology, his life was proof that perseverance and compassion could overcome even the greatest odds. And though Ethan knew his story wasn't perfect, there had been failures, doubts, and sacrifices along the way. He also knew it was far from over. Life, after all, was a continuous journey of growth and discovery. As long as there were people in need, challenges to solve, and dreams to nurture, Ethan vowed to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Because sometimes, all it takes is one act of kindness, one leap of faith, or one chance meeting to change everything. And Ethan Carter, once a poor boy who saved a stranger in a lobby, had proven that truth time and again.